Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show.
Okay, so the entire foundation of this book, the whole thing, rests on one single crucial distinction. It argues that to even begin to understand this hidden history, you have to realize we're not just talking about one kind of God, we're talking about two, and they are fundamentally different kinds of beings. On one hand, you've got the true creator of the universe. Now, this isn't some guy on a throne in the sky. It's an all-encompassing, ever-present force that is creation itself. It can't get jealous or angry or go to war. But then, you have the biblical gods, right? Like Yahweh and Jehovah. The book describes them as physical, flawed, and kind of limited beings who are always demanding proof of loyalty and honestly show some very human-like emotions.
I am your host, Curt Williams, and this is the Soul and the Body Show. Today we have a very special guest. What I'm doing is digging up very important people from the past. The things that they learned, as far as I am concerned, are extraordinary, and they're worth looking into. Again, we must not forget these accomplishments that some of these great people have made. Now, I never knew anything about him. I've been studying metaphysics for 50 years now, and as a matter of fact, it seems he and I have a very interesting background in common. He was a Sunday school teacher who turned into a clairvoyant by some means. I'm sure he'll explain this to you. Did I mention his name? His name is EDGAR CAYCE. He was born in 1877 and died in 1945. Now, this was at a time when the world's new age sort of thinking beyond the earthly realms thing actually began, really, and he was one of the pioneers in that. They say he's a clairvoyant. Now, I don't agree with that, because from what I found out, what a clairvoyant is actually is someone who is able to look inside of themselves and see things. Then you have your clairaudience who listen deeply and they could hear things. So from my experience, this thing that you're communicating with is indeed your spirit. However, this thing that you're communicating with can communicate with you in absolutely any kind of way that it chooses. It may show up as a car. It may show up as a burning building. It can show up as anything it needs to show up as, just to make its point, so your reaction could get the results that it wants. So anyway, we're past that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the beginning, it's a show that he did back at some particular time, and then I'm going to stop it at different intervals and see if now, he's actually the person that I've heard. I just ran into him across him last week, and I honestly agree with more of what he's saying than anybody I've run into so far. What I said we have in common, him being a Sunday school teacher. I went to child evangelist school. I started going to child evangelist school when I was 3 years old, which is ridiculous, but it's a true story. I was being babysat by my grandmother, as I've told before, and ordinarily little kids would go to the back, but I stayed up front during the course, and I was able to help my grandmother put together the curriculum and the syllabus for her Sunday school class, and we had to prepare this, for every Sunday. So I went to child evangelist school 3 times a week up until the time I went to kindergarten. So I have a very extensive background in this kind of thing. I was actually working. I was making the flannels and doing the stuff, and yeah, So anyway, that is another story. So what we're going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of Edgar Cayce so you'll see where he's coming from. And then I'm going to stop him, and then I'm going to comment on some of the things that he's saying to see the difference between how he thought back then and how a person that basically does the same thing he does today. Okay. Edgar Cayce.
Every prayer you've ever whispered, every moment you've begged for help, every time you've looked at the sky and wondered if anyone's listening, you are talking to something. But according to Edgar Cayce, it wasn't what you thought it was. Not an old man on a throne, not a judge tallying your sins, not even a separate being watching from above, deciding whether you deserve mercy or punishment. What Cayce discovered in his 14,000 readings shattered every Sunday school lesson, every religious doctrine, every comfortable image humanity has created to make the infinite manageable. And once you understand what he really saw, what God really is, prayer changes. Life changes. Everything changes. Because the truth is both simpler and more staggering than any religion dared to tell you. God isn't watching you. God isn't judging you. God isn't even separate from you. And that's not New Age blasphemy. That's not spiritual rebellion. That's what Cayce, a devout Christian Sunday school teacher, discovered when his consciousness touched the source of all consciousness. When he asked the ultimate question and received an answer that made him weep, not from fear, but from recognition. You've been looking for God in temples, in books, in the sky. But Cayce found God in the last place religion told you to look. The one place that changes everything once you truly understand it. And today, you're going to understand it. The shattering discovery. Edgar Cayce didn't want to discover what he discovered. He was a traditional Christian. He taught Sunday school. He read the Bible daily. He believed what he'd been taught. God was the Father, separate, above, watching, judging. But in trance after trance, touching the Akashic records, accessing universal consciousness, something else emerged. Something that initially terrified him because it contradicted everything he thought he knew. God, the source revealed through Cayce, is not a being. God is being itself, not a consciousness. Consciousness itself, not a creator separate from creation, the creative force that becomes creation. Cayce wrestled with this. How could God not be a separate being? How could the Father that Christ spoke of not be a personality, a separate entity one could pray to, petition, please, or displease? The answer came in reading 900-227. God is the life force that animates every atom, the consciousness that experiences through every soul, the love that connects all things. You don't find God by looking up. You find God by going within, because that's where God experiences itself through you. Think about what this means. Really think about it. Every moment of your existence, you're not being watched by God. You're being experienced as God. Your consciousness isn't separate from divine consciousness. It's divine consciousness focused through the lens of your individual experience. One woman asked Cayce, "If God isn't separate, who am I praying to?" His answer changed her life. You're praying to your own highest nature, to the God that you are, beneath the illusion of separation. Prayer isn't petition to another. It's alignment with what you really are. The ocean and the wave.
So now we understand where he's coming from. There is a God inside of all of us. And he's going to stick to that point. However, later on, I'm going to sort of disrupt that just a little bit, because You know, it's a very wonderful thing to say, and it sounds wonderfully amazing to say that we are God and God is within us. However, it doesn't quite work that way, but it's very similar to that. It's very similar to that. So we will move on, and we're going to break this whole thing down to the very specifics, and by the time we are finished here, we will know exactly. Now, okay, let's move on.
And the wave. Casey used a metaphor that makes this radical truth graspable: the ocean and the wave. Every soul, he explained, is like a wave on an infinite ocean. The wave appears separate, has its own movement, its own apparent identity, but it's never not the ocean. It cannot be separated from the ocean. It is the ocean, expressing itself as a wave. God is the ocean. You are a wave. You appear separate, but you're made of God stuff. You move with God movement. You exist within God existence. When the wave crashes and returns to the ocean, it doesn't go somewhere else. It just remembers what it always was. This is why, Casey revealed, you cannot be separated from God. Separation is impossible. You can forget you're the ocean, but you cannot stop being the ocean. Hell isn't separation from God. It's the illusion of separation while still being God who has forgotten itself. A minister came to Casey, troubled by this teaching. If we're all God, why do we suffer? Why does evil exist? Why does God allow terrible things? Casey's response was profound. God doesn't allow suffering. God experiences suffering through the parts of itself that have forgotten what they are. Every pain you feel, God feels. Every joy you experience, God experiences. You are how God knows what it's like to be human.
It's interesting that he would describe the thing as an ocean, like ocean waves, and we're all just little particles of water within a great ocean. I find that interesting because God is also science, and as science grows and gains knowledge, we then get into quantum physics. Quantum physics meaning physics on a very, very, very small level. And what we found out through the double slit experiment and experiments such as that is that the Creator is an information system that sends information through the galaxies in a form of a wave of information, a wave that they call probability, which means all possible things within the stream of the wave. That's why you have so much diversity in this world. All possibilities are within the stream of the wave, and this wave goes out in now as it goes out, consciousness, once consciousness notices the wave turns into something very interesting. It turns into particles, which means it now has mass. It now can turn into something. Instead of just being information, it will turn into something solid, solidity. So his description about how a wave is also parallel to the scientific expression as far as how information travels, and this is how God really permeates all things, and
The law, not the lawgiver. Here's where Casey's revelation becomes even more radical. God isn't a being who created laws. God is the laws. God is the law of love, Casey stated. Not a being who commands love, but love itself as a force, a law, a fundamental reality like gravity. You don't please or displease gravity. You align with it or suffer the consequences of misalignment. This changes everything about morality, sin, judgment. There's no angry God punishing you for breaking rules. There's simply the consequence of acting against your own nature, against the fundamental law of love that you are. Sin, Cayce explained, is simply error. It's the wave trying to move against the ocean. It creates suffering not as punishment, but as natural consequence. Like touching fire burns, not because fire is judging you, but because that's what fire does. When you hurt others, you're literally hurting yourself, because there's only one consciousness experiencing through billions of perspectives. When you love others, you're loving yourself. This isn't metaphor, it's metaphysics. This is why Christ said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Cayce revealed. Not as much as yourself, as yourself. Because at the deepest level, they are yourself. Another wave in the same ocean, another expression of the same God.
Okay, let's move on.
The Christ pattern. Now, Cayce was Christian, and what he discovered about Christ in relation to God was revolutionary. Christ wasn't God's only son. Christ was the first wave to fully remember it was the ocean while still being a wave. The Christ, Cayce explained, is the pattern, the prototype, the first to achieve complete God consciousness while in human form. Not the only Son of God, but the eldest brother showing all waves how to remember they're the ocean. This isn't diminishing Christ, it's understanding Christ's true accomplishment. He didn't come to be worshipped as the exception. He came to be followed as the example. "You will do greater things than these," he said. Why? Because you're made of the same God stuff he was. Every soul, Cayce revealed, is destined to achieve Christ consciousness, to remember fully what you are while still in form. This is the entire purpose of existence. God knowing itself through infinite experiences, then remembering itself through those same experiences. One theologian challenged Cayce. "This sounds like pantheism, like you're saying everything is God." "No," Cayce replied. "Not everything is God. Everything is in God, of God, through God. God is more than the sum of creation, but creation exists within God's being. Like your thoughts exist within your mind, but don't comprise the totality of your mind." The personal God paradox. "But I feel a personal relationship with God," people would tell Cayce. "I feel loved by something greater than me." Yes, Cayce would confirm, because the infinite can be personal. The ocean can focus itself as a wave. The whole can commune with the part. You can have a personal relationship with God because God is the person you're having the relationship with, both sides of the conversation. This is the ultimate mystical paradox. God is utterly transcendent and utterly immanent, completely beyond and completely within, the furthest star and your next heartbeat. When you pray, Cayce explained, you're not sending messages across space to a distant deity. You're aligning your wave consciousness with ocean consciousness. You're remembering what you are beneath what you appear to be. Prayer isn't changing God's mind. God doesn't have a mind separate from all minds. Prayer is changing your mind, aligning it with the divine mind you already are but have forgotten. That sense of presence you feel in deep prayer or meditation, that's not God visiting you, that's you recognizing the God you always were. The peace that passes understanding isn't sent from above. It rises from within when you stop creating the turbulence of separation. Why evil exists. The question everyone asked Cayce, if we're all God, why does evil exist? Why would God create suffering? Why would the ocean create storms that destroy its own waves? Cayce's answer reframes everything. God didn't create evil. God created free will, and free will created the possibility of evil. For God to know itself fully, it had to create the possibility of not knowing itself. Light can only know itself as light by creating the possibility of darkness. Every soul was given the ultimate gift, the freedom to forget what it is. Why? Because remembering has no meaning without forgetting. Coming home has no joy without having been away. Reunion has no sweetness without separation. Evil, Cayce explained, is simply the degree to which consciousness has forgotten its divine nature. Hitler wasn't a demon. He was God so lost in the illusion of separation that he could commit atrocities against his own being. This isn't excusing evil. It's understanding it. Evil is severe spiritual amnesia. It's the wave believing it's separate from and superior to other waves, not recognizing they're all the same ocean. But
Now see, here's where I would differ. Ultimately, he will get into what's the main purpose of all this. He says that it's God is experiencing himself through us. What that means is that once given a being free will with a brain to do whatever they want to do, then this thing becomes something that is not God. This is where I differ slightly. What he's trying to say is that, for example, the molecular structure of man, you have over 7 octillion molecules in your body. That's a 7 followed by 24 zeros. Now, in this molecular structure, one of those molecules is your spirit molecule. Out of all the molecules in your body, there is one who is actually the spirit molecule. Dimethyltryptamine. That's the one that God has given you from himself. So the truth of the matter is, there is only 1 octillion of a molecular aspect of God in you. But it's powerful enough to wake up your whole body and to drive you until the day you pass away. Without it, you wouldn't live. It's enough to spark the entire body to live a lifetime. Without that spark, it's gone. But it's like I said, it's only 1 octillion of a percent of the whole human body. So when he keeps saying you're God and you're a long way from God. But you have a small aspect of God that's trying to get your brain that has free will to do anything it wants and worship anything it wants except God to learn enough. Now he's giving us hints. He's given him books. He's given him thousands and thousands of pages to write on the subject. That's why he knows so much. However, as an average human beings, most of us are not God. Most of us are what their brain tells them they are. Most of them are people who are exactly what someone else, like religion, tells you you are. Religion is not going to tell you you are God. Your religion is going to tell you that you need God. Without God, you will go to hell, and you're going to need the church to help you get to it. So this whole thing about we are God, okay, it's a metaphor. It's like, yes, God is the ocean, and we are the H in the molecule, in the water molecule. So we're a long way from being, but we got a pen.
The heaven and hell truth. What about heaven and hell? If there's no separate God judging us, what happens after death? Cayce's revelations about the afterlife shocked everyone. Heaven and hell are states of consciousness, not places. They're degrees of remembering or forgetting what you are. Heaven is consciousness fully aware of its divine nature, experiencing the bliss of unity.
And you couldn't exist without it. Why wouldn't you have a personal relationship with something you can't live without? You have a personal relationship with your blood. You have a personal relationship with your eyes. Why wouldn't you accept a personal relationship with something that's inside of you and driving the whole machine?
Both sides of the conversation. This is the ultimate mystical paradox. God is utterly transcendent and utterly immanent, completely beyond and completely within, the furthest star and your next heartbeat. When you pray, Casey explained, you're not sending messages across space to a distant deity. You're aligning your wave consciousness with ocean consciousness. You're remembering what you are beneath what you appear to be. Prayer isn't changing God's mind. God doesn't have a mind separate from all minds. Prayer is changing your mind, aligning it with the divine mind you already are but have forgotten. That sense of presence you feel in deep prayer or meditation, that's not God visiting you. That's you recognizing the God you always were. The peace that passes understanding isn't sent from above. It rises from within when you stop creating the turbulence of separation.
Be careful with that. Like I said, it's all metaphoric. The whole notion that you are this God principle. God did not put a piece of himself into you so you can be him. What would be the point of that? He wouldn't learn anything if so I believe EDGAR CAYCE is just trying to get you to understand that you have a part of God in you. He's not, I don't think we have people that have freedom to become anything except God-like. And that's what he was talking about when he was talking about the Christ consciousness. Now, Christ might have been more like God than the average person. Of course he was. That's the whole point. That's why he was the Christ. However, this notion that I would rather put it like we have the potential of God in us. But there are too many things that have occurred on this particular planet for the last 4,000 years that would teach us anything but this fact. I have friends, or I had friends, for years that probably aren't my friends anymore because of the way I talk now. They're so against what I'm saying, they don't want to be my friend anymore. But
when you hurt others, you're literally hurting yourself, because there's only one consciousness experiencing through billions of perspectives. When you love others, you're loving yourself. This isn't metaphor, it's metaphysics. This is why Christ said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Casey revealed. Not as much as yourself, as yourself. Because at the deepest level, they are yourself. Another wave in the same ocean, another expression of the same God. The Christ pattern. Now, Casey was Christian, and what he discovered about Christ in relation to God was revolutionary. Christ wasn't God's only son. Christ was the first wave to fully remember it was the ocean while still being a wave. The Christ, Casey explained, is the pattern, the prototype, the first to achieve complete God consciousness while in human form. Not the only Son of God, but the eldest brother showing all waves how to remember they're the ocean. This isn't diminishing Christ, it's understanding Christ's true accomplishment. He didn't come to be worshipped as the exception. He came to be followed as the example. "You will do greater things than these," he said. Why? Because you're made of the same God stuff he was. Every soul, Casey revealed, is destined to achieve Christ consciousness, to remember fully what you are while still in form. This is the entire purpose of existence. God knowing itself through infinite experiences, then remembering itself through those same experiences. One theologian challenged Casey. "This sounds like pantheism, like you're saying everything is God." "No," Casey replied. "Not everything is God. Everything is in God, of God, through God. God is more than the sum of creation, but creation exists within God's being. Like your thoughts exist within your mind, but don't comprise the totality of your mind." personal God paradox. But I feel a personal relationship with God, people would tell Cayce. I feel loved by something greater than me. Yes, Cayce would confirm, because the infinite can be personal. The ocean can focus itself as a wave. The whole can commune with the part. You can have a personal relationship with God because God is the person you're having the relationship with, both sides of the conversation.
I'm beginning to understand him more and more and agree with him more and more than I thought I would. The whole "we are God" is a metaphor. We are a piece of God. So he knows that because he's explaining how we can get so far away from God. This God principle has to basically put aside exactly what he is in order to learn the things that he's trying to learn from beings with free will. So he's putting aside his God aspect so he can learn from scratch, which is a very hard thing. But you have to know that a being like the Creator, who knows the past, present, and future, knows where all this is going to end up. So we as people have to have a little bit of patience, because it's all going to come together in the end. Is what my grandmother used to say. If the method seems odd to us, we are not supposed to understand everything about the Creator anyway. The created could never conceive the Creator. So we will never know all these things, but be assured that it knows exactly what it's doing, and it's decided that this was the best way to get there.
For God to know itself fully, it had to create the possibility of not knowing itself. Light can only know itself as light by creating the possibility of darkness. Every soul was given the ultimate gift, the freedom to forget what it is. Why? Because remembering has no meaning without forgetting. Coming home has no joy without having been away. Reunion has no sweetness without separation. Evil, Cayce explained, is simply the degree to which consciousness has forgotten its divine nature. Hitler wasn't a demon. He was God, so lost in the illusion of separation that he could commit atrocities against his own being. This isn't excusing evil. It's understanding it. Evil is severe spiritual amnesia. It's the wave believing it's separate from and superior to other waves, not recognizing they're all the same ocean. But here's the hope. No soul can remain lost forever. Every wave eventually returns to the ocean. Every prodigal eventually comes home. It might take lifetimes, eons, but every spark of God eventually remembers its God. The purpose of existence. So why did God do this? Why did infinite consciousness fragment itself into billions of limited perspectives? Why did the ocean become waves? Cayce received a stunning answer. God desired to experience itself, to know itself, to express love and be beloved. But how can the infinite experience anything when it is everything? Only by becoming finite. Only by limitation could the unlimited know itself. You are how God experiences being human. Through your eyes, God sees. Through your pain, God learns compassion. Through your joy, God knows happiness. Through your love, God experiences being loved. This isn't a game, Cayce emphasized. It's not a test. It's not a judgment. It's God's way of experiencing every possible variation of existence. You're not being tested by God. You are God, testing the boundaries of experience. Every life is sacred not because God values it from outside, but because every life is literally God living. Every death is God experiencing transition. Every birth is God beginning.
See, so what he's saying is God needed you to be different than himself. And of course he knew you were going to be different than himself. The only bad thing about all this is that I could only imagine how much we could accomplish if religion and spirituality tried to become closer instead of going farther and farther apart. Religion likes to separate itself from science. Science likes to separate itself from spirituality. All in an effort to prove who's right. And in order to gauge the right and the wrong of it, it's more of a system that is, the right is the one that they feel has the most blessings, so to speak. Those highly favored is the one who is the
Those who lived in love find themselves in realms of love. Those who lived in fear find themselves in realms of fear, not as punishment, but as natural consequence. You go where your consciousness resonates. But here's the hope. Hell isn't eternal because forgetting isn't eternal. Every soul eventually remembers. Every wave eventually recognizes it's the ocean. It might take countless lifetimes, but God doesn't lose pieces of itself permanently. Eternal damnation, Cayce stated boldly, is impossible. How could God damn part of itself eternally? It would be cosmic self-mutilation. The prodigal son always comes home because home is the only thing that truly exists. What prayer really is. Understanding what God really is completely transforms prayer. You're not begging a separate being for favors. You're not trying to change God's mind. You're aligning with what you really are. True prayer, Cayce explained, is recognition. You're recognizing the God within yourself and others. You're remembering your true nature. You're aligning your wave will with ocean will. When you pray for healing, you're not asking God to intervene. You're activating the God healing force that you already are. When you pray for guidance, you're not waiting for external messages.
That's what I was saying. That's why the metaphor, we are God. Well, you couldn't learn how to be human if you stayed God. So yes, I really do believe that he and I are on the same page. Because he does understand that no, you can't be God and human at the same time. It's always going to be a human who is striving to be like God, not
An affirmation, thy will be done, isn't submission to another's will. It's recognition that divine will is your deepest will once you remember what you are.
So God forgot he was God. But I don't know if I completely agree with that, because what the part of you that's inside of you that is God is trying to communicate with you. Some people are harder to communicate with than others. It was very easy for his consciousness, his God consciousness, to get his attention, even though he was a Sunday school teacher. I recognize exactly how mine did whatever it took to get me to listen. So it's not really, do I agree with that or not? The God in you has the ability to get your attention any kind of way it wants to. If it doesn't get your attention, it is, in fact, allowing you to express yourself as a non-godly thing. So again, I still agree with you.
Became human to experience humanness. Meditate to bring divine consciousness into human experience, not to escape the very experience God chose to have through you. The love force. At the core of everything Cayce discovered about God was this: God is love. Not loving, not capable of love, is love. Love isn't something God does, Cayce explained. Love is what God is, the force that holds atoms together, that draws souls to each other, that makes mothers die for children. That's not powered by God. That is God
See?
in
That's
action.
what it's all about. It's about the journey. A piece of God who has forgotten it was a piece of God, and then it through lifetime it becomes so. Perhaps this sojourner right here had been through so many lives that it gained the ability to communicate better within each life, and the same may go for myself.
That religion couldn't explain. Sometimes truth is recognized, not learned.
And I can tell you this. Nowhere that I've discovered in religion could you find this information. The religion thing is the same dogma. It's not anything. I haven't. For me to go to a church and find something useful, because the scriptures do not define it the way this is defined. The scriptures don't. The scriptures will remind you more of the separation between you and God and how you need to beg and pray in order to get God's attention.
The veil of forgetting isn't punishment. It's the gift that makes the journey possible. Amnesia isn't a mistake. It's the starting point of the greatest adventure possible. God discovering itself through you. Every soul, Cayce explained, is on a journey from unconscious divinity through conscious humanity to conscious divinity. You start as God who doesn't know it's God, become human seeking God, and eventually realize you were God all along. This is the hero's journey playing out in billions of souls simultaneously. Each one forgetting, seeking, and remembering. Each one a unique path for God to know itself. Comment below if this resonates with your inner knowing. Share what you've always felt about God that religion couldn't explain. Sometimes truth is recognized, not learned. The Christos within. Edgar Cayce revealed something that would have been considered heresy in his time. The Christ consciousness isn't.
What he's saying here is that Jesus is coming back. However, it won't be in the form of a man. It will be in the form of a wave of consciousness where there will be many people who are understanding this God, this principle. So imagine a multitude of people who are beginning to think alike. That's the Christos principle that he's speaking of right now.
While still maintaining its wave form. This is the second coming, Cayce revealed boldly. Not Christ returning from clouds, but Christ consciousness awakening in humanity. The second coming is internal, not external. It's you remembering what you are. Every miracle Christ performed, Cayce explained, you're capable of. Not because you're equal to Jesus the man, but because you have access to the same Christ consciousness he accessed. The same God force that flowed through him flows through you. You just haven't remembered how to channel it yet. The religious revolution. This understanding doesn't destroy religion, it fulfills it. Every religion Cayce showed is humanity trying to remember what it is. Each one holds pieces of the truth, filtered through cultural understanding. Don't abandon your religion, Cayce advised. Understand it deeper. See past the literalism to the truth it's trying to convey. Every religion is a finger pointing at the moon. Don't worship the finger. Look where it's pointing. Christianity's Trinity, the three aspects of the one consciousness. Hinduism's many gods, the many faces of the one divine. Buddhism's emptiness, the one before it becomes many. Islam's absolute monotheism, the one that allows no separation. All religions, Cayce revealed, are rivers leading to the same ocean. They seem different because they flow through different terrain, but they're all water, all heading home, all teaching the same truth in different languages. You and God are not two. The practical application. So how does knowing this change your daily life? How does understanding what God really is transform your existence? First, you stop fearing God. How can you fear what you are? You might fear forgetting what you are, but you can't fear God any more than your wave can fear the ocean it's made of. Second, you stop begging. You don't beg yourself for what you already have. Instead, you recognize, accept, and express the divine attributes that are your birthright: love, wisdom, creativity, joy. Third, you see everyone differently. That annoying coworker, God having a different experience. That criminal on the news, God lost in dark forgetting. That saint serving the poor, God remembering itself through service. Fourth, you take responsibility. If you're God experiencing life through your unique perspective, then your experience matters. Your choices matter. You're not a puppet. You're the divine expressing through free will. Fifth, you lose the fear of death. How can God die? You might change form like a wave returning to ocean, but you cannot cease to exist because existence itself is what you're made of. The ultimate recognition. Here's what Cayce most wanted humanity to understand. The God you've been seeking is the seeker itself. The divine you've been praying to is the one praying. The love you've been desperate to receive is the love you're capable of giving. You haven't been abandoned by God. You are God experiencing what abandonment feels like. You haven't been judged by God. You are God learning what judgment creates. You haven't been loved by God. You are God discovering what love is through experiencing and expressing it. The kingdom of heaven is within, Christ said. He meant it literally. Not that heaven is inside your body, but that heaven is your true nature when you remember what you are. Every spiritual teaching Cayce showed is trying to wake you up to this one truth. You're not a human seeking God. You're God having a human experience. You're not trying to get somewhere. You're already there, dreaming you're on a journey. The return home. The entire spiritual path, all of religion, all of seeking, Cayce revealed, is simply the journey home to what you've never actually left. You're already in the ocean, dreaming you're a separate wave, slowly waking up to the wetness that proves you never left the water. Enlightenment, Cayce explained, isn't gaining something new. It's losing something false, the illusion of separation. It's not becoming divine. It's remembering you always were. And here's the beautiful paradox. Even after remembering, you can choose to continue being a wave, playing in form, experiencing the divine play of existence. But now you play consciously, knowing it's play, knowing you're safe, knowing you're eternal. This is why souls reincarnate even after enlightenment, Cayce revealed. Not from karma, but from love. God so loves experiencing that it returns again and again, each time a new adventure, a new perspective, a new way of knowing itself. The final truth. As we end, let me leave you with what Cayce considered the most important thing to remember about what God really is. God isn't disappointed in you. God isn't angry with you. God isn't testing you. God isn't judging you. God is being you, experiencing through you, learning as you, growing with you, celebrating your joys, feeling your sorrows, walking every step of your journey not beside you but as you. You've never been alone because alone is impossible. You've never been abandoned because abandonment is illusion. You've never been unloved because you're made of love itself. The God you were taught about, separate, distant, judgmental, was humanity's attempt to understand the incomprehensible. But the God Cayce discovered, intimate, immediate, identical with your deepest self. This is the truth mystics have always known and religions have always hidden. You don't need to earn God's love. You are God's love in form. You don't need to seek God's will. Your deepest will is God's will. You don't need to fear God's judgment. God doesn't judge the dance. It's dancing. If this truth resonates in your soul, share it with others who are ready. Subscribe to go deeper into these mysteries. Comment with your own recognition of what you've always known but religion never confirmed. The search is over. Not because you found God, but because you recognize that the seeker and the sought were always one. The wave has remembered it's the ocean. The dreamer is awakening to what it really is. And what you really are is so much grander than any.
So I think we've just about gotten it. See, now, I understand the whole thing a lot more. He's not trying to, it's a metaphor. No, we're not God, because he has to separate from God in order to achieve the understanding of being human. So we're God pretending to, we're God living as humans. So we have a long way to go. I don't know if it would be do any good for all of us to rise to the level of God, because God wouldn't learn anything. And maybe that's why we are doomed to make mistakes. However, I think we are getting somewhere. I think this is going to help. At least I need this, because I'm out here alone trying to pass on this message. So just to hear someone like this person, born and living before I was here, saying the same thing means that I'm not alone. So thank you guys for coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we're going to keep bringing you content like this from very brilliant people that I agree or I disagree with. Thank you.
Right there, right there.
Subscribe and push the like button.